Well, folks, today we have some interesting news. We have a few headlines for you in regards to Nintendo. One of them is about something Nintendo is apparently doing this week, according to Pioro, and we're going to get to it. It's not exactly what you guys might want it to be, but it's still a pretty exciting thing. But for most of this video, we're going to be focusing on Digital Foundry because they have now finally examined and talked to their own sources in regards to the Nintendo Switch 2 and the motherboard and chipset leaks. And today, it's really all about the power of the system, but we'll put a few timestamps down there so you guys can go and talk about the power of the system, some people refuting some of the things that Digital Foundry said, and then obviously we'll get to that story from Pioro, you know, that infamous leaker out there. All right. Without further ado, though, I want to make sure that we shout out the person who made our images that are in our thumbnail. We have a link down in the description if you want to go check out their work over on Reddit and other places. Really great work, man. Excellent stuff. Thank you for allowing us to use that. And also, we're on the road to 140,000 subscribers, so I would appreciate if you would go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And let's go ahead and check out this Digital Foundry piece. So they made a whole video, to be fair. We're not going to watch the whole video. It's like an hour and 40 minutes long. It's a podcast, and there's a lot in there. But thankfully, they did a write-up we can go over that summarizes some of their key points. So Digital Foundry Weekly, what does the Switch 2 motherboard leak say about system performance? Should we be concerned about the Samsung processor? No, and you guys know about this leak at this point. We covered that last week. All right, this is why Richard Ledbetter, he's the guy who runs the Digital Foundry stuff here. And it says, after a 1-week hiatus, we're back. All right, let's get into this for a little bit. So why is this news so important? Comes down to ongoing discussions since the Switch 2's T239 processor was first leaked. Renowned and highly reliable leaker Kopite 7 Kimi revealed back in 2022 that Nintendo and Nvidia were developing a T239 processor for its next-gen handheld, seemingly a cut-down version of the massive hulking T234 used in the automotive industry. Kopite 7 Kimi believes it is fabricated on the Samsung 8nm process, as used for the T234 and Nvidia's entire range of RTX 30 series consumer GPUs. At 455mm squared, T234 is just too vast and power hungry for a handheld, and yet the motherboard shots reveal that it is clearly a Samsung processor within Switch 2. If it's another 8nm chip, this has serious implications for either performance or battery life, especially when the battery compartment looks much smaller than the Steam Deck. Now, I talked about this on live stream about the battery compartment in the image, and I went ahead and I have this right here. This is a standard Nintendo Switch. This is just like one of these little rail thing. I don't know. I can't remember what these things are called. I got them a long time ago. That covers up the side rail, protects the circuitry and stuff. But anyways, point is, this is a normal OG Switch and its normal battery compartment. And while this is more square, the other one's obviously more rectangle in their image. The other one is deeper than this. So it looks like the battery is actually thicker. So I'm not so sure that the battery is actually smaller. I think we're looking at probably a 5,000 milliamp hour or what do you want to call it? A 20 watt hour battery. This is a 16 watt hour battery. So I just want to be very clear. I don't think the battery compartment's actually smaller overall. Anyways, getting into this. He estimates that new SoC is around 200 to 220 millimeters squared based on the size of the surrounding memory modules, believed to be in the region of 196 millimeters squared. This is much, much higher than Steam Deck's LCD's 163 millimeters squared and the OLED revision's 131 millimeters squared. While some believe the Samsung 8nm is not dense enough to contain the logic in a 200 to 220 millimeter square area, I beg to differ. Switch 2 apparently has 1,536 NVIDIA CUDA cores, while NVIDIA's RTX 3050 crams in 2,560 of them into a 200 millimeter squared chip. Cut back the CUDA cores, expand the footprint of the chip, and I think it's quite feasible to fit Switch 2's CPU, GPU, media, and file decompression logic onto the chip we've seen leaked. One thing I do want to note, though, when we talk about the RTX 3050 cramming 2,560 CUDA cores into 200 millimeter squared, the RTX 3050 doesn't have 8 A78C CPU cores. An APU has CPU and GPU. The RTX 3050 just has GPU. Again, not saying it's not 8 nanometers. just pointing out that this isn't a for sure thing. And you'll see this in the article as well, that they're not like 100% sure that it is 8 nanometers. All right. Cut back the CUDA cores, expand the footprint of the chip, and I think it's feasible to fit the Switch 2's GPU, CPU, media, and decompression logic onto the chips we've seen leaked. That said, there are theories that another Samsung process may be in effect. Perhaps 5 nanometer, 7 nanometer has been floated out there as well. Hands-on with the final hardware, we may get some idea via power consumption metrics, but ultimately the whole 8 nanometer question will only be categorically answered when the likes of Tech Insights have thoroughly analyzed the product. They do x-rays and stuff of chips. All right. We're skipping over their video part. We're just sticking to the article here. Whichever way you slice it, the news of a Samsung chip does put the Switch 2 at an efficiency disadvantage up against the Steam Deck and the vast array of Windows PC handhelds out there. These are based on fabrication technologies from TSMC, the most successful chip maker in the business right now. With a Samsung chip, clock speeds will be lower and power efficiency won't be as good. However, equally, I'd argue Switch 2 has its own secret sauce that none of these devices have: the power of a fixed platform. Last year, the Digital Foundry team took it upon themselves, the best tech from Switch 1 games, coming up with a range of extremely impressive first and third-party offerings. This year, it's a whole decade since the Tegra X1 mobile processor was announced, and yet, from 2017 onwards, that same processor, downclocked significantly from standard specs, delivered hit after hit on the Switch platform to the point where we coined the impossible port phrase when we first saw Doom 2016 running on it. I'd also point you towards Oliver McKenzie's remarkable video comparing the existing Switch to iPhone 15 Pro. True, it's an actively cooled chip up against a thermally challenged, fanless design, but even so, the veteran processor holds up rather well, all things considered, bearing in mind its vintage, which is true. The 15 Pro is only a couple years old at this point, and yeah, it's not the best gaming thing out there, but there are modern AAA games being played locally on iPhone 15 Pro, so it is interesting that, hey, the Switch can still kind of hold its own, hence why it's still around and still producing games that are selling very well. All right. There's no reason why a Switch 2 with a Samsung produced processor node won't do the same throughout its lifespan, particularly as the fundamental NVIDIA technologies are so good. 8 ARM A78C cores pair with NVIDIA's Ampere architecture to deliver machine learning features and even ray tracing. Expect loading times to be considerably reduced owing to the inclusion of a custom file decompression block. Another advantage Switch 2 has over its predecessor is the T239 is specifically built for the purpose at hand. Even if there are challenges with the process technology, they would have been factored into the design and thoroughly tested during the simulation phase before the first chip was manufactured. Ultimately, we need to trust that Nintendo and Nvidia know what they are doing, but this is still a better place to be compared to Switch 1, where Nintendo effectively had zero input in the chip design. And let's not forget the negative reaction and outrage when we revealed the original Switch clock speeds. Well, 150 million units later, everything seemed to turn out just fine. And I think that that's really important to note, that all the speculation right now, all the dooming or all the praising or trying to figure out if it's 8 nanometer, or 7 nanometer, or 5 nanometer, in the end, whatever we think about this, what matters is there games we want to play and how well do they run? That's basically it. Is there games we want to play and how well does it run? The clock speeds don't really matter. You know how many times I think about the clock speeds of the Nintendo Switch? Almost never. Obviously, I notice the performance hits in games, and it kind of sucks that we can't get a consistent even 30 FPS in a lot of Nintendo's recent releases. But again, we know when new systems are around the corner, and a consistent 30 FPS, that ain't going to be a problem. In fact, we're probably going to have consistent 60 FPS in most Nintendo games. Let's get to the last bit here, because they talk about how they don't feel like this is actually going to be comparable to the PlayStation 4 Pro. Which is going against, by the way, conventional logic. But it says in this week's Direct, we also tackle the online discourse surrounding the idea that Switch 2 will offer performance in line with the PS4 Pro, when docked at least. I'm not entirely sure where this notion came from, but in a world where AMD's top-of-the-line Strix Point processor running on the latest TSMC process is nowhere near Pro's rasterization performance, I'd say this is wishful thinking, which often surrounds new console speculation. Think more along the lines of base PS4 graphics performance, augmented with modern GPU features and solid ray tracing support. I'd also expect NVIDIA DLSS to do a lot of heavy lifting, which I find interesting when they bring this up, because the thing about this system is, yeah, it's not going to have near the raw processing output, but raw processing output, that rasterization output, isn't the be-all, end-all with modern technology. When you got the DLSS, when you got the ray tracing, when you got the modern featured sets, it kind of leads to it not being as important. It's still important, of course, but I'm just pointing out that, look, no one's saying that this chip was ever going to go blow for blow in raw rasterization. It was, can it be good enough that the games look as good as PlayStation 4 Pro games do and run as well as they did? That is where all this is coming from. It's not, if you guys think this is just going to be a base PS4, let me tell you, base PS4 wasn't doing 4K anything. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind. All right, speaking of which, this week's Direct also tackles Nintendo's upscaling patent, which on the face of it at least looks to be a thorough description of NVIDIA DLSS, which is certainly an interesting take on the Nintendo and NVIDIA partnership. However, as Alex Battaglia discusses, there's much more to it. It's kind of a grab bag of various upscaling techniques for various scenarios, none of which seem to be particularly new or patent-worthy. However, there's one very interesting element that's worth discussion. In my T239 simulation test using a very low-powered NVIDIA laptop GPU, the computational cost of DLSS proved challenging. DLSS isn't free lunch. Processing time scales with output resolution. In my test with Death Stranding, while DLSS upscaling from 720p to 1080p and even 1440p were viable for a 30 FPS game, 4K was off the table. DLSS cost was around 18 milliseconds to upscale to 4K, in excess of the 16.7 millisecond frame time to run at 60 FPS, and over half the frame time budget for a 30 FPS experience. The patent is interesting in that it accepts that machine learning-based upscaling is challenging, and it suggests that the complexity of the AI model could scale according to a target frame rate. I'd expect Switch 2 to announce soon, and it'll certainly be interesting to see third-party developers break cover with product announcements. If you watch the video above, you'll see that ballpark GPU performance can run a great many games at highly respectable quality levels. I suspect that based on my projections, a vast array of PS4 era ports will appear in addition to Nintendo's first-party fare, and I wouldn't rule out ray tracing support in certain games. I'd also expect current gen titles targeting 60 FPS to somehow find their way to Switch 2, likely running at 30 FPS instead. The next few months should prove fascinating. Now, what I find interesting about all of this is it's being refuted a little bit here, because we have Necro Felipe Lima, who's got his own sources out there. He came out here and put this tweet out, and he says, me watching Digital Foundry's video about what they speculate for Switch 2's performance, and he's got the classic meme there from Anchorman. I don't believe you. So look, obviously we don't know what the performance level of the platform is going to be in the end. We don't know the clock speeds. We don't know what, upscaling trickery is going to be at play. We do know that Nintendo is, however, taking it very, very seriously. So I just want to sit back and see what happens here. Obviously, once we see the games and how well they're running and looking, that's going to be the big determining factor on if we feel like there's enough power here in the Switch 2. I think for Nintendo games, I ain't worried about anything. Nintendo made magic happen with Switch. They made magic happen with Wii. They made magic happen with 3DS, DS. So, Nintendo's going to be fine. Their games are going to be great. This is obviously about third-party support. And let me tell you, based on what I've been told, there's a lot of major AAA current-gen games coming to Nintendo Switch 2, including games not even announced yet. So I'm just going to let bygones be bygones here. Everything is guesswork at the moment until we actually have the device in hand. Now, some of you guys are expecting a Nintendo Switch 2 reveal this week. And look, I've been sort of hinting that I've heard some things, but I can't really talk about it. January is all I'm going to say. But I will tell you that I have not heard that this week is the week. And we now seem to have, I don't want to say confirmation, but a rumor at least suggesting that, yeah, this week is actually a week for Xenobalde Chronicles X. Why? Well, I put up here, I'll read my tweet in a bit, but we got this from Pioro. This is Pioro's account. It says, we're getting Xenobalde, aren't we? He does a little smug thing. You're messing, aren't you? It might be Switch 2 to this. It might be something else to this. And he says, last time, due to my vagueness, people expected the Switch 2 announcement, but it turned out to be Xenobalde. I don't want to mislead you all again. He's just directly saying Xenobalde is happening this week. Now, I noted here, Xenobalde time this week, it seems, according to Pioro. This was initially said by Ninspider over on Family Boards, and he said this week was Switch 2 or Xenobalde Chronicles X. Sorry, Weibo dude. Unless Just Playing, based on chatter going around this week, wasn't the week. Would love to be wrong. Remember, Genki is dropping some Switch 2 something tomorrow. Might not be anything that matters. I doubt it's going to be new info, but you never know. What I will note here is the Weibo dude, the Weibo dude or whatever, he had a Xenoblade or has a Xenoblade profile picture, and we all kind of just ignored it. So it's possible his countdown to the 8th was always about Xenoblade. So he might not have been wrong either, and it was just misinterpreted. Remember, we interpreted it, or the world interpreted it as Switch 2 because he had talked about Switch 2 previously. But really, it could have just been Xenoblade. Anyways, doesn't really matter. Seems like Xenoblade Chronicles X trailer, overview trailer, something or whatever is happening this week. Kind of weird given that Donkey Kong Country Returns HD is next week. You figure this week would be like a final master big trailer for Donkey Kong, but I guess they could do that next week as well with the game coming out next week, Thursday. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Obviously, we have CES this week. We got NVIDIA doing their keynote tonight. I doubt there's going to be anything Nintendo related mentioned in that keynote. If there is, if they actually talk about the T239 during their keynote, I would actually be really shocked if they do that before the system's announced, but NVIDIA does like to talk, so I guess we'll see. I doubt anything's going to happen, though. We'll be live streaming tonight, and we'll probably check in and out on the keynote throughout the stream just to see if anything's happening. But, yeah, we're going to be live streaming tonight like usual. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I am Nathaniel Robojets from Nintendo Prime. Let me know what you think about all this madness down in the comments below, and I'll catch each and every one of you in the next video.